I'll let Councilmember Sarah go back to Nera, but the port did send us an email specifying that they gave pertinent information in advance of the July 17th meeting that noted Nera was not acceptable and have told us that they remove the property from any list of possible options to site housing now or in the future on that property. So that should not be something we waste time on any longer. They've been very clear. I would also like to clarify that Nicholsville came to our council meeting in person and talked about their agreement to serve as a fiscal sponsor should we have a camp. They stood right there and told us that their board had agreed, or their membership had agreed. Also, I was present when the unhoused people were swept off the private property on the north end of town, and they were not directed to the island median. They had nowhere else to go and noticed a patch of grass and decided to drag their tents over there after officers confirmed they wouldn't remove them. That was a bunch of desperate people conferring amongst themselves where they might be able to go, and that's where they chose to go. They did not receive any directive to go there. They actually asked me, and I told them I had no information to provide on that location. I hadn't thought about it, hadn't looked into it. So I just want the record to be really clear that when we sweep people, they become desperate and they find places to go that are less than preferred for many of us. And that's what we knew would happen, and that's what has happened. So I am noticing that this timeline has no mention of the offer that KCRHA made on April 21st. I received correspondence from KCRHA noting that they had actually sent an offer to our city manager to create a tiny home village on the Seattle City Light property in a partnership with our city. And that's something that was never presented to Burien City Council. It's not mentioned on this timeline. I'm curious as to why that was never presented to us. April, it's a long time ago. Tiny home village would have been pretty cool. And that I've been told is no longer an option on the table. They've moved forward with the process that has removed us from consideration of that.
Here I could respond. I think, and I'll be frank, I think one of the subtleties that is lost on some members of council is context. There is only some information that is accepted, but not all of it. And in this instance, context is important, just like it's important for everything. I will share this. Any member of my team, and including some members of council, including Councilmember Sarah, have seen unsolicited advertisements that are received by the city every day. We receive messages from every number of group advertising new software, latest and greatest, and everything else. I don't bring those to council because they are just superfluous to the general operation of government, and they are one, unsolicited, two, just general marketing, and three, not something that we're going to bring to council because they're not important. So I share that with you all as context because, again, it's important to have context. And in this particular letter that is being referred to, or I'll put in quotes, offer, because it is being referred to by some folks as an offer, just like a marketing firm can refer their new software as an offer. The city had received a request by a property owner, and in this case, the city of Seattle. They were wondering if we were interested in any kind of partnership that they were considering. They owned lot in the city, and our response to the city of Seattle, like it is for every property owner, is tell us what you're proposing. Tell us what information you'd like for your particular lot. We are a particular city, just like they are. If they have information that they'd like for us to review for a potential project, share it with us. That's where we were. And that's what the city of Seattle was doing. They had expressed an interest in one of their lots. They had expressed an interest in doing something. We were a partner, like we are at every type of these types of issues, willing, speaking with them, meeting with them, engaging, interested in what they were potentially offering. These conversations went on roughly for, I'd say probably about a month, not having the timeline in front of me. Then we fast forward to April 21st. I received this letter through email, and so do members of my team. And I will share with you both, or share with you council, that my team member and I that received this, our jaws dropped. We thought, what is this? This is not at all what we had been talking about with the city of Seattle, the information that they had shared with us. This literally was out of left field, not at all with the facts as had been presented by the property owner. So I'll be honest, I had to take a break from the particular issue for a few hours. Members of my team, or the member of my team with whom I was working on this, advised that I, go get a cup of coffee before I issue a response. And the response that we reached was just a very basic one, to send a message to the city of Seattle to say, were you aware of this supposed offer? Did you work with the Regional Homelessness Authority on this potential offer? Just literally, were you aware of this? And the response from the individuals with whom we were working with on this particular project said, we didn't know that the Regional Homelessness Authority was sending this letter. They did not notify us. We had no idea that they were sending this. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but that's almost literally what they said to us. Again, the facts in the letter were incorrect. The information at this point had not been corroborated with the actual property owners. They had no idea that this third party was sending an offer to them on their behalf, or an offer to us on their behalf. And so I, being your manager in charge of running the city, took this as an unsolicited, unverified offer, just like I would any other, that had no merit to the conversation because it had not been vetted by the actual owners. So that's why this was not brought to council. It wasn't presented to us by the owners of the lot. The owners of the lot had absolutely no information on why this was created and sent to us. And so now we're moving forward. I can share with you that there is potentially more happening with that particular project. We, again, like with everything else, we are involved, but this third party group likely not going to be involved at all. So now council's having a conversation about a non-offer that was made on behalf of a property owner that didn't know this offer was coming from a third party group that is likely not going to be involved in this project at all.
So to clarify, you're comparing an ongoing month-long negotiation with the city of Seattle and an email from KCRHA to spam that wasn't worth sharing with us in the height of a crisis. But that's fine. Moving on.
Councilmember, I object. You
Okay.
raised some serious accusations, and you're referencing something as a negotiation, when again, we were not negotiating anything. We were informed by a property owner of a project they wanted to do, and were including us in their plans. We were not negotiating anything. And even at this point, I will be very clear with you that there is no negotiating happening. I have not been authorized to negotiate. I've been authorized to find locations and bring back to council. I have not been authorized to negotiate. So I take exception with your characterizing or using that word very loosely on something that is not happening.
So you were in communication.
Okay, Councilmember Moore. Okay, just if you have another comment,
Sure.
you need to just raise your hand like every other council member. So go ahead and have your comments.
Okay. Yeah, I have several other questions, but being in communication with the city of Seattle on a piece of property that was being discussed while we're in the middle of a crisis trying to find properties, I think that it raises a lot of questions as to why council was not informed about that, especially since what I've been told from KCRHA is specifically that they sent a proposal to our city, and continuing to say that we're trying to partner with KCRHA and then essentially saying that they're sending us a spam proposal is, I take issue with that characterization of KCRHA's proposal. But moving on, Rebel X. We were told,
I would like to ask Councilmember Mayor, if I may ask the Councilmember. At one point, does she consider an offer to be an actual offer? I ask because we're having this conversation about a party that is not associated with a particular owner with a lot.
sure.
And so I think I need clarification from council, because if council is requesting that I bring to it every unsolicited offer, then I can do that. But if I'm being told that I need to use my judgment as the professional, which is what I did, then if there's separation there, I'd like some guidance.
Well,
Sure.
I think that this question is, I don't think we need to go into that, because as you know, right in front of us right now, this background was really about, because we have these ongoing discussions, wanting to make sure that a timeline events just kind of keeps us focused on where we've been and where we're going. So I want to hesitate going into a tangent that just is going to escalate and not get us anywhere, because right now in front of us for consideration still is a motion that was put forward by Deputy Mayor to look at. Nera was in there. Now I know that Councilmember Sarah brought up some really good concerns, and is part of the process. Anyone can put out an idea from the council, and then having this information from the port or otherwise is certainly appropriate in other King County properties. So that was what was put forward by the deputy mayor. It had sufficient votes to move forward. So I just want to stay on that. And we could talk offline about processes, about what's entailed with the city adopting an offer. But as we all know, there's some process about what it is, actual motion by the council, if it's a policy decision, and we move forward. So I don't really want to get into this as an argument. Okay. So are there other comments? I know that Councilmember Moore, you had another comment. Are there other comments? Councilmember Mata, sorry, didn't see your hand there.
Well, I'd like to thank you, City Manager, for a great report. I think that here it's pretty simple. We're different councils. So I would rather prefer a council to speak for themselves, not speak for the entire council. We know we have difference of opinions here, pretty strong difference of opinion. And so I think we're just going to have to battle it out here. I mean, that's kind of where it's at. That's what it sounds like. So for me, I think it's important that I know where we've been at is where we're going. I still think that the Seattle properties, because there's only three that I hear here. I'll just say it, the Toyota dealership, which, I know that there's some council members that want that to go through like tomorrow. I still think that the county is responsible for the three county properties they have. They got the south parking
Councilmember
space.
Mata, hold on one second. We have like a audio thing going on. What is that? Okay, go ahead.
We have the south end of the parking garage and the north end of the parking garage and the garage. And we have the Seattle City Light property. I mean, those are the only three that I see, unless, I'm missing something. But I think it's been a process. I'm sure that there's, some individuals, on our council that feel that we should have got this done 2-3 months ago. But, here's what it is. It hasn't been any other city that's been able to figure this out. Number one, I don't think even on the West Coast, it's a national issue. It's a drug epidemic. It's a mental health epidemic. It's a housing epidemic. It's not one thing. On top of that, we have a crime epidemic. And so I do believe that, it's this whole thing of this notion is that if we move encampments, all of a sudden they're going to show up where we don't want them to show up. Well, yeah, that's true. I mean, I think that we have a no camping ordinance that will soon be heard by this council, but I do believe that, and I've said this before, that we need to have a shelter somewhere in Burien. And I got to tell you, I'm going to be very transparent on it. I'm not going to support a shelter where we're going to have, mental health illness, where we don't have the providers, and where we have extreme drug abuse, where we don't have the providers. Those are special needs that we need. We need psychologists. We need mental health specialists. We need nurses. We need healthcare professionals. So I want to thank you because, you were directed by the majority of the council And that's how it operates. It's the majority of the council that sets the direction for the city manager on what they're asking for this council to be brought back to this council. Now, council members can, as a minority, can object to it all day long, but doesn't mean that, that's the belief of this council. Thank you.
Councilmember Moore. Councilmember Sarah.
Thank you. My brain just keeps circling around Nera, and I thank you, Councilmember Mata, because what you said is our priority is to find out what we can do. And I thank the council member for reminding us of that. But I do keep going back to this Nera property, and while it was the will of the council to vote on it, if there was information, which the letter from Sarah Cox appears that there were conversations saying that it was not inhabitable in any way. I am frustrated that my colleagues were debating and voting on the desirability of something that was a toxic crash site due to insufficient information, due to not knowing that it was completely off the table. And it seems like this harmed all of us. And that if that information was known, that the decision was a foregone conclusion.
So Councilmember Sarah, so I'll just share that in my position as mayor, I've been in conversations with the port and the city manager about Nera in general, because the port approaches the city of Burien in a collaborative way in terms of, here's an important piece of land. We're thinking of some ideas and we want to get you in on the get-go about what they might be. Now, this is a different discussion from homelessness, but there were some exploration of commercial uses related to airport operations. So that has been in the past. So it's not like it's an area of land where nothing can be done on it. There are limitations. And again, I think the purpose of the motion is to understand what that limitation is. The other piece is that there was some information from community members who've been here a very long time, thinking that it may be developable. And even though there are toxicities, that it could be remedied somehow. Now, I'm not an expert. And so again, back to the motion, the purpose of that was to get information to say, how possible is it to remediate that site? And so we're hearing a lot more on the negative side at this time, but that wouldn't have happened unless it was put out there as a question. So I think that's exactly what the motion and the process is meant to do, is just really clarify appropriateness of Nera after it's just been floated as an idea. So, okay. Councilmember Moore.
So we were told that in a previous meeting that Rebel X offers an immediate solution with beds available right now, 116 beds in Renton available right now. Turns out that's not the case. There's actually a number of steps that would go into that. It's a hotel right now. It's not even a shelter. Those spaces would have to be rented. KCRHA would need to put out an RFP to contract a service provider, which takes a minimum of 90 days. And that's if we could even afford that. And it would require the city of Renton to give approval for us to use our funding to send our unhoused population to their jurisdiction. I'm curious why we were told those 116 beds were available right now. That's what we were told. When I had previously asked our city manager the Thursday prior to our Monday meeting a number of questions related to this, none of which were answered, but our community was presented with a statement saying that we have the cure-all. Basically, we have enough shelter beds for everyone immediately. We can move everyone right now. And it has created an immense amount of confusion in our community. And so I'm curious why that was put out. And I feel like clarification on that situation is still needed. Our city has, alluded to the idea that this is not something we're moving forward with. We haven't clarified as to why. We haven't clarified as to the barriers surrounding this, even though we have gotten information from KCRHA detailing that. Why was this presented as an immediate viable option if this was absolutely not even, these beds weren't even in existence at that time?
Councilmember, I'll answer your question, but again, I feel you're using words very loosely, and it's very dangerous. So I will say that, and I will say that to every member of council that uses words. Words have meaning. It is important to use the right word, because if we don't use the right word, then we are potentially mischaracterizing an issue or misleading people to believe certain facts that may not be facts. You mentioned specifically that the 160 beds do not exist. Yes, they do. They do. The owner of the facility has said to us that 116 units exist and are available. So that specifically answers the question of whether these units exist or not exist.
They exist as a
And
hotel, not a shelter,
Councilmember,
for clarification. Right.
Councilmember Moore, please let the city manager finish his comment, then you can respond.
The question about whether or not we can afford the location, I specifically had mentioned to council that we had reached out to the county to ask if the $1 million offer may or may not be used at this location. Again, the issue of affordability falls specifically on the use of the $1 million, which is why the request was made to the county to use their resources that they had offers to us through KCRHA. The response that the Regional Homelessness Authority had issued to us is that the county was amenable to this. They were open to discussing the use of the $1 million at this location. But again, it was predicated on approval from the host city. Councilmember, you mentioned again very loosely that you had posed questions that went unanswered. Unless you are actually going to provide proof that this happened, I strongly suggest that you please not mischaracterize any interaction that you and I have as in did not occur. Again, it's very important that if we're sharing this information, that at the very least you tell me what questions were not answered, and then I could give you an answer or tell you why I cannot provide you with an answer. But again, the location had been identified by a member of council. I was directed to investigate. I did, and the property owner identified themselves as a partner agency to the Regional Homelessness Authority, had presented themselves as being available to us. I had specifically mentioned the name of this particular person or this group to the county, and they were open to discussing the use of this location with monies that were offered to the city. So in terms of how government was operating, we were pursuing leads as they were being presented to us. We were communicating with the funders of any particular camp, which is the county, and asking them if we could make use of this money. We communicated with the group that the money is to be used through, so that we could ask them for specific information about how to particularly use this money. So we were communicating with every particular partner.
So I'm going to ask, is Deputy Mayor Schilling on Zoom right now? Do you see him? I'm just looking.
Yes, I am on Zoom.
Did you want to add anything? Because you
No,
were-
I don't want to add. I don't want to add anything. The city manager was there every step of the way, and there's no need to add anything else to what he's saying.
All right, well, I'm going to wrap up this conversation. You can have one comment because we're really behind time, although I think it's important to share this information. So go ahead.
Thanks.
Councilmember.
I take issue with the city manager essentially calling me a liar by saying that conversations that we had in our one-on-one, which city council members usually engage in with our city manager, didn't happen. I'll make sure to put any questions in writing from now on, but that's a serious allegation that I'm lying. Also, When it comes to playing loose with words, our city manager told our community 116 shelter beds are available right now. Those shelter beds do not exist. It is currently a hotel. They could be converted into a shelter, and that is in writing from KCRHA. So talking about playing loose with words, let's be careful. Right now does not mean 90 days after KCRHA contracts a service provider or we pay money to rent out that hotel and convert it. I think that we need to be really clear to our community what the expectations are in terms of why we are not moving 116 people into 116 beds right now when we're being told they're available. We should also be clear about the expectations of whether we can use land or not when the port tells us it's a hard no. And we should also be clear about the fact that the county has refused use of their metro property time and time again for housing, but has offered us use of that for parking for Toyota, which Toyota has failed to acknowledge, which is not well represented in this presentation in regards to Toyota's response and their assumption that they'd have to lose employees. There's nothing that I've seen that has responded to that and clarified why they'd have to lose anybody. Quite frankly, my question is, why are we spending time rehashing all of what's happened instead of moving forward with anything viable? This has been, what, an hour? I don't know how long, and months and months and months. And we're reviewing places that are not viable. We're rehashing options that were never viable. And we're not actually having conversations that will move us forward while we have people literally outside dying. But I'll call that a rhetorical question for now, because I don't think we're getting anywhere tonight. Thanks.
Okay, so I think I agree, it was really long conversation, but clearly there's a lot of disagreements about what happened. So there's some use to just putting it out on the table. And honestly, this also shows how difficult it is to place people who are unhoused in appropriate treatment and or housing. So there was an article that Lehigh sent us. Lehigh is an operator of tiny homes, and I was shocked to hear that the Seattle area has the third largest homelessness population behind New York and Los Angeles. So there's a reason why we are struggling with this issue, because we're not the only ones. So I just didn't want folks to miss the big picture, that it is difficult to find a solution to this, and there is no magic bullet, okay? There's a combination of things, and that's what we're trying to do. So I appreciate the conversation.